This is the Digital Factory podcast. I'm Jon Bruner. Before we get into today's conversation, we've got a really exciting announcement. The Digital Factory Conference is coming back to Boston on May 7th, and you won't want to miss it. This year, it's hosted by Jeff Immelt and brings in all sorts of incredible speakers, including Jennifer Hartsock, who's the CIO of Baker Hughes, Joe Hogan, who's the CEO of Align Technology, the biggest user of 3D printing in the world, Rick Fulop, the CEO of Desktop Metal, which is revolutionizing the metal 3D printing industry, and Rob Carter, the CIO of FedEx, which possesses the most legendary logistics system in the world. You'll hear from all these people about how they're driving entire businesses with digital manufacturing and supply chain technologies. For more information, visit thedigitalfactory.com. And when you register, use the code PODCAST for a discount. Again, that's thedigitalfactory.com. My guest today is Jeff Immelt. He's done a lot of stuff. He's currently the executive chairman of Athena Health. He's a venture partner at NEA. And of course, he's the former chairman and CEO of GE, where he served from 2001 to 2017. Jeff, it's great to have you on the program.
John, great to be with you.
So you and I are collaborating on a very exciting project, which we're announcing today, which is the Digital Factory Conference coming back to Boston on May 7th, 2019. You're hosting that with us. So tell us a little bit about your interest in this field. What's exciting you about manufacturing technology?
Yeah, so John, just one of the things I wanted to do in retirement was to continue to pursue a couple of my passions, only do it in partnership with entrepreneurs and using disruptive ideas and technologies. Two places that I'd worked in a lot in my career and really cared about are in healthcare and in advanced manufacturing. In both cases, I see dramatic needs for kind of business model and technical innovation. In the case of manufacturing, there are more emerging technologies today than in any time in the past 35 years. Manufacturing has been, revolutionized clearly by automation and by process ideas like lean manufacturing and things like that. But now with analytics and AI and automation, additive manufacturing, all kind of coming at us, I think there's a real manufacturing renaissance that is underway, not just in the U.S., but around the world. So, John, that's one part of it. I think the other part of it is that I've always had this notion that if you're not a CIO, it always helps if you know the art of the possible with digital tools. And in my experience, kind of the frontline manufacturing leader has had digital delivered to them, but hasn't had the opportunity to be the actual shaper of their digital future. And I think that's going to have to change. And I see that as the main purpose for the conference.
So you're saying a lot of these manufacturing leaders and supply chain leaders are kind of handed some kind of technology piecemeal by someone else in the organization, a CTO or someone, but they're not actually getting a chance to lead that process strategically themselves.
It's exactly what I'm saying. Some of it is natural and to be expected, right? But if you think about the last generation of digital tools, whether it was ERP systems or MES systems or things like that, those were basically sold in the CIO's office. And a really good CIO would know how to implement it in the factory floor, but that couldn't be assumed, right? And frequently the handoffs were missed and the systems were inflexible and things like that. I think today, when you think about kind of analytics, when you think about machine learning and AI, even when you think about automation, those are really going to be user driven. They're going to be driven by the process engineer and not by the CIO. And so I just think the nature of the tools and the fit for purpose are dramatically changing. And it's not that the CIO doesn't need to be involved, but you really have the opportunity for the manufacturing person to be the consumer of digital versus just being let's say, being the recipient of digital tools.
Right, right. It seems like a lot of other, departments, other parts of these big organizations get digital tools, pretty seamlessly. The sales team is given Salesforce, the marketing team is given all sorts of digital marketing tools. But the implementation of digital tools on the factory floor takes decades, of course, because of the amortization processes for big equipment, but also maybe some cultural stuff.
Yeah, no, I think it's exactly right. I think if you're a CFO of a Fortune 1000 company today, you have a pretty good digital foundation because finance people for 15 or 20 years have been a consumer and a buyer. I think Mark Benioff and Salesforce.com really liberated the sales team, and then you have all the companies, GitHub. I could go down the list of digital marketing companies, and I think manufacturing, which is really what shapes the profit structure for the company, the speed, the availability for a company, is really kind of the last dominion of where I think a lot of these digital tools can take place. And I think the other thing I would say, John, is that frequently what happens in the factories is going to shape what the sales and marketing people can do. Mm-hmm. So the demands for more late point identification, more flexibility, lower cost, more speed that are required by the marketplace have to be delivered in a setting that's not as structured, that's not as kind of one IT system driven, but where you're going to have more flexibility.
So one of the things we're pursuing in this conference is the idea that innovation on the factory floor and in the product development process can drive entire new business models. You can do stuff with customization, stuff with your supply chain, as you mentioned, decrease risk and bring products to market faster and in more flexible ways. That's really, driven by the technology itself. How do you think organizations ought to set themselves up so that people from the manufacturing organization can bring these ideas to the business side?
It's really a great question in terms of how the tools can be more relevant, even as it pertains to sales and marketing. And I don't think anybody has kind of cracked the code for that yet. But one of the things we're going to show in the conference are companies like AlignTech, right, who is really revolutionized dentistry, if you will. And this is a company that exists because of additive manufacturing. You couldn't have a company unless you had the process tool, right? So you're going to see examples like that. You're going to have disruptors like some of the big logistics companies like FedEx, who can use now automation and AI to really get closer to their customers and actually maybe even get in the service business for the product lines that they used to just be logistics supports for, right? Mm-hmm. So you're just going to see kind of people that are connecting the dots between, what does it mean to make an investment in automation, and what does it mean to guarantee because of the automation, to be able to guarantee to your customers shorter delivery cycles, more flexible products, things like that. So I think one of the things we're going to try to do at the conference is connect the dots between technical innovation and business model innovation, and show some companies that are really far along the lines of that path. Right.
As someone who's run a very large and complex, manufacturing-driven organization yourself, what are the other companies you always have looked at and admired in terms of the ways that they drive the business with manufacturing?
So look, I would say everybody of my generation grew up studying the Japanese companies. Mm-hmm. So, we would always marvel at kind of lean manufacturing and things like that. I think if you flash forward to today, it's the ability to kind of manufacture really complex systems. So Boeing, even automotive companies, where you are kind of literally taking subassemblies, thousands of subassemblies, and perfecting them with kind of high quality levels have always been, I've been very envious of those. And I would say those are the two extremes of kind of like what I would say I admire most today is the ability to be scale-based, but still be fast and in high quality. I think that's going to be key. And then, I think, John, today, if you look at what Apple has done in the context of consumer electronics, if you go to kind of the Consumer Electronics Show, your head just gets filled with, kind of the way that technical innovation has really infused what we think of as being just kind of mainline consumer products like the cell phone.
I'm really excited to hear from Gary Johnson at the conference. He's the head of manufacturing at Ford, oversees all of the production and the labor at Ford, and that is a cool example of a company that's just become extraordinarily sophisticated with the supply chain, as you mentioned, parts coming from all over the place. And if you visit the River Rouge factory, it's extraordinary. They can produce 4 different models simultaneously on a single assembly line. And if you compare that to what the automotive industry looked like a few decades ago, it's just completely different. There's a rumor, and maybe it's irresponsible to speculate, but in the 80s, if you bought a lot of cars, you'd have a different key for the door to the cabin and the ignition, and for the trunk. And this was promoted as kind of a security feature, so you can drop it off at the valet or whatever. My understanding is that this was a manufacturing reality, that the lock tumbler was put in the trunk in a different part of the factory than the lock tumblers for the rest of the car, and they couldn't deliver the trunk lids to the car bodies reliably enough to wind up with the same lock on both. So you compare that to today, where you have 4 different platforms even rolling off the same assembly line simultaneously, and you can see how sophisticated these companies have gotten.
Look, I've always had incredible respect for the automotive industry in terms of what they do at scale. I think the interesting thing in the conference, or the interesting thing that I see today, is just the wave of technology and how pervasive it's going to be. There's what I mean is when you look at where kind of these new technologies are coming, they're not going to differentiate between big companies and small companies.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And in some ways, it's going to allow people to achieve scale at lower runs than before. It's going to allow big companies to be more flexible than ever before. So it's not clear that small beats big or that big beats small. I think what's clear today is that smart beats dumb, and that's, the people that know how to use these new tools and skills are going to be far ahead in the end.
So in your role as a venture capitalist, where you're a partner at NEA, what kinds of stuff are you looking at? What are you excited about these days?
Yeah, look, I think it's allowed me to kind of continue the passion. So one of the things I like are kind of like tech-enabled services, and mainly in healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
And picture, I would consider, let's say, Google is a horizontal company, GE, Boeing, we're vertical companies. I think what you're seeing today is kind of companies that are supported by horizontal technology that are able to deliver as a unit of one.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm seeing those in healthcare, which is quite interesting. And then on the manufacturing side, I usually talk about kind of the 4 A's, which are artificial intelligence, automation, analytics, and additive manufacturing.
Mm-hmm.
And at NEA, I've had a chance to participate in every one of those technical areas, and it's quite exciting.
So in all of those then are really driven by computation and by sort of software creeping into the factory floor.
Yeah, look, I think it's kind of it's clear that either software or the output of software being computational analytics are going to be key. I'm also really keen on things like additive manufacturing, where you have a materials flow, you've got precision components like lasers, you've got a hardware aspect, you've got a software aspect, you've got a design aspect. And if you look at robotics and some of the other things, I think people that kind of can do these hardware software intersections,
mm-hmm.
which is rare, really, because I think to a certain extent, I'm in California right now, people just hate hardware out here.
Right,
They
right.
just do. If you can combine MIT with Stanford, you're going to get pretty good results. If you can get the hardware and the computational stuff out of MIT and the computer science and some of the software skills in the West Coast,
Right.
that's where a lot of these manufacturing winners are going to come from.
Right, right. Yeah, it's interesting to see. I've been following the hardware space for a while now, and saw a brief wave when Google especially bought up a lot of robotics companies around 2013, when they bought Motorola around the same time, and everyone said, "Oh,
Yeah.
all of these software companies are going into hardware." And then they ditched these companies a couple of years later.
No. It's like one of the things that's good about business is when things are hard and not easy.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to do hardware, and it's even harder to do hardware when you have to blend it with computational tools, software, things like that. But there's going to be a big pot of gold for whoever figures out how to do that.
Right.
And again, it's not a direct analogy, but one of the things I admired about Uber is Uber a tech company or an operating company, right?
Mm-hmm.
The answer is it's both, right? So I think to a certain extent, the companies of the future are going to be more systems oriented. They're going to be able to do both horizontal and vertical, and not one or the other. And that's, I think that's going to be really interesting. And again, you and I hope to bring that to life in this conference in May.
Absolutely. Everyone can be a tech company now. I mean, I think that's a very powerful message. I think, John Deere has thousands of software developers, which is more people than a lot of, very familiar tech brands have.
Exactly
Same with Boeing or Ford or, FedEx. Any of these big companies are really motivated by technology. Until very recently, they haven't really talked about themselves that way. But I think one of the things that's changing is the value that the market and that, customers put on being a technologically driven company.
And the outcomes it drives, whether it's in productivity or margins or organic growth, are the things that are really critical for customers and investors and the other people that are in the family, if you will.
Jeff, I'd love to ask you the question I ask everyone on this podcast. What's your favorite tool?
My favorite tool. Okay. I'm going to say the elliptical trainer.
No kidding.
So it's I've lived a life of kind of working 100-hour weeks, being away from home 200 nights a year, traveling the world, high stress, high pressure. And for me, kind of exercise is the relief valve. So when you get to be my age, it's harder to go outside, run outside and things like that. But the elliptical is the perfect blend of exercise and brainlessness that a 62-year-old really values.
They're impressive machines. Like these physiologists really figured out how to create exactly the right movement that's easy on joints, but still good exercise.
Exactly right. So whether it's been in Shanghai or Astana or Joburg or Paris or New York City or Boston or Mexico City, I've been on every elliptical trainer known to mankind.
Have you tried out any of the new sort of software guided exercise equipment like the Peloton bike or anything like that?
Yeah, there's a Peloton store here at the Stanford Mall that I kind of walked in because you can see, you can't miss the ads, particularly to watch football.
Right.
And it's quite compelling. The ability to actually have a trainer or to compare yourself to other people, no matter where you are, is, an extremely compelling idea.
Right.
Yeah, I haven't done it yet, but yeah, I find it to be really interesting.
Speaking of, your routine, what's a day in the life of Jeff Immelt like these days?
Well, it's changed. In retirement, you have more control a little bit over your own time. I think my goal in retirement was to work almost as hard as I did in my previous life, but to only pick the things that I want to do.
Right.
And so far that's been good. It's been kind of splitting time between Boston and California, and really getting a chance to pick the things I want to work on. And I wanted to, I would say, be helpful. And I guess in my own mind, the best way to be helpful I think, is to try to help this next generation of great entrepreneurs. And that's really what I want to try to do in the rest of my working career.
It's important too, because a lot of the entrepreneurs come out of a software background or a web background. And when you start to address these big, difficult problems in the physical world, it becomes very complicated, and you need the advice of people who have worked in that field.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's very, it's fun and rewarding, I would say.
All right, Jeff, it's been a pleasure speaking with you today. Really excited about the conference we're putting together on May 7th, and love working with you on it.
Great. Same here. Hope to see you soon.
All right, thanks, Jeff. I hope you'll join us in person on May 7th in Boston for the Digital Factory Conference. You'll learn all about transforming entire businesses with digital manufacturing technologies. Visit thedigitalfactory.com to register and use the code PODCAST for a discount. For the Digital Factory Podcast, I'm Jon Bruner.